Bio 120. This week we're going to be working on making a couple different things. We've got two aims for the week. We're going to be making three kinds of auger plates. Auger plates are a commonly used resource in biological research. They're used to grow all sorts of different microorganisms, bacteria, yeast, all kinds of things that are very common in biological labs. We're going to be making three different kinds of them. That's aim one. And then we're also going to be making some TAE buffer. And it might not be incredibly clear right now as to what these are going to be used for, but we're mostly prepping these two things for future weeks. We've got we're going to use those plates in Lab 5, and then we're going to use this TAE buffer in Lab 4. So in a couple weeks we'll come back to these. But we wanted to do this prep now because this builds on the calculations that you did last week. And that's where you'll find the recipes that we're going to be using this week. You'll notice in your lab manual that you just have some blanks to fill in to make the various plates and buffer that we're going to be doing this week. And so you can look back to week 1 to figure out now how much you need to add of these things. And it'll require some more calculations, but you should be proficient in that at this point, or at least have had some experience with it. So what we're going to start off with are the plates. And before we dive into that, we're just going to find some gloves. Glove up. We want these plates to be as sterile as we can get them. And since there are bacteria all over your hands, we put on these gloves so that those bacteria don't contaminate the plates that we're going to make. And so, first thing to do is to measure out the powders that we're going to need. I believe there are 4 or 5 that you're going to have to calculate how much you need and then measure them out. And so once you get to that point where you're ready to measure them out, we'll have these scales out on the benches, so you'll be able to use these. The way you use these is you have your scale zeroed, it's on, and what you can use to measure out your powders is either a weigh boat or weigh paper, and we'll have one of these two things out on the supplies cart. And so if you're going to use the weigh boat, you can just throw that on there, and then before you measure any powder, you're going to want to zero it. And so what that does is it zeroes the scale so that when you are measuring things, you'll only see the weight of the powder that you're putting in the weigh boat. Alternatively, you could also use the weigh paper. What I've done here is actually folded up the edges of every side to kind of make a makeshift weigh boat. And so either is going to be just fine to use for measuring out your powders. Now, with your powders, I pre-measured out some of the things or the reagents that we'll need that we'll be putting into our plates, into this weigh boat. And so what you're going to do is once you have your powders measured, one at a time, you'll be adding them to our 250 ml flasks. And these should also be out on the supply cart. So you and your lab partner will have to grab one. Once you have all your powders in the Erlenmeyer flask, you're going to fill that up with some water. Now we want to use extremely clean water, and you'll find some distilled water in these carboys. There'll be one on each bench, and they're filled specially with very clean water, so we need to use that to make these plates. And so what you're going to do is use a graduated cylinder, measure out 100 mils of water, and add that to your powder. Okay, so once you've done that, you'll want to give the flask a bit of a swirl. Try and mix up all the powder with the liquid. And then you're going to place a wet paper towel over the top of that. Again, trying to keep all of the bacteria that are in the room out of our plate media. And then you'll take your flask and your agar mix over to the microwave. And there should be a microwave either on the back bench of your lab or on the side bench. And what we're going to do is set this for a minute on high. And there should also be some orange gloves around the microwave. You're going to want to use those to handle the flask once it comes out. You're going to be watching this flask until it boils. And it should boil within 4 to 5 seconds to a minute. But you want to watch it carefully because it can easily boil up and boil over. And so as soon as you start to see those bubbles forming, you're going to want to stop the microwave and pull it out. And so we're coming up on about 45 seconds now. And this whole process will help make this mixture now a homogeneous solution. And we're going to be also in this process melting the agar powder that will help set our plates. And so I saw some bubbles coming up. I'm just going to take it out and swirl it around a little bit. And it still looks like there is a little bit of powder not quite melted yet, so I'm going to put it back in and give it a little bit more time. Another 15 seconds. And again, watching it carefully so that as soon as it starts to boil, I'll pull it out again. Okay, so this is looking fairly clear. It's a little bit difficult to tell what's powder and what's bubbles, but if you just let it sit for a little while after swirling it, you'll see all the bubbles rise to the top and you'll have a fairly clear agar mixture. And so that seems to be the case. I think we've melted everything there. And what we're going to do now is let that sit, let that cool. We don't want to pour molten, extremely hot molten agar into our plates for the sake of the plates, for the sake of the plastic of the Petri dish itself. And so we'll let that sit for a little while. But while that is sitting, what you can do is label your plates. You're going to want to label them with 3 different things. You want to put your initials on them, you want to put the date on them, and then the media type on them. And so, and what you want to do is label it around the edge. And so, what I'm going to do is write right around the edge of these plates with my initials, the date, and the media type. So, with my Sharpie, I've done that. You can see that just around the edge. And as I said, we're going to be making 3 different types of plates, 3 kinds. And so you want to be sure to be very careful and precise when you label these plates with LB plus amp or LB plus amp and arabinose. So you want to do that to all your plates. I'm just going to leave it at 1 for now and test our agar here. You can see that as it's cooled, the bubbles have escaped. Ideally, when we pour these plates, they'll be completely bubble free, and you can kind of see that that is a little bit viscous, and that's good. That's the agarose in there, and then as it cools, it's going to set, and it's going to have the consistency of almost a hard jello. And so this is cooled for 30 seconds to a minute maybe. We could let it go for a little bit longer. And so when you go to then pour these plates, be careful, this is still hot. What you're going to do is actually take off and set aside the paper towel. You're going to flip the plate that is labeled on the bottom. You're going to flip that bottom down, and you're going to want to take off the top and pour in a bit of agar, enough agar to just cover the bottom, and then immediately put the top back on. And this is, again, you want to minimize the amount of time that this plate is exposed to the air, because we do have bacteria in the air, and we want to keep these plates as sterile as possible. When we do put bacteria on here, we want only our bacteria to be grown and nothing from the environment. And so, again, just enough to fill the bottom of the plate with agar. That's all you want to pour. You don't want to fill up the plate. You just don't need to put that much in, and the closer the surface of the agar is to the plate top, the more difficult it will be to work with later on. And so you can just keep going. Be sure to note in your lab manual how many plates of each kind to pour. You're going to be pouring one type, and then you'll be adding solutions as you go, or either arabinose or ampicillin as you go along. Pay attention to your lab manual to see what the series of additions you'll make. But then as you let these, or as you pour these, you don't want to then pick them up and move them around a whole lot. Keep them on the surface of the bench. You can kind of slide them slowly off to the side if you need space, but you really don't want to disturb the liquid so much so that it'll splash around and get on the top of the plate. So a little while ago, I poured some plates, and you can see that there's still some condensation on the top, but if you take off the top a little bit, you can see that the plate is now cooled. The agar has solidified. It's taken on a slightly more opaque state. It's solid, so it's not going to fall out of the plate, but that's how you pour these plates and let them cool. And they should all be labeled and should all be set for week 5 when we're ready to use them again. And that's how you pour plates. Now, you will have some extra agar left over, and you don't want to pour that leftover solution down the drain. It'll solidify in the pipes, cause a huge mess, cause a plug. So what should be out and about, either on your benches or up at the front of the room, is a beaker labeled waste agar. And what you want to do before this agar solution solidifies is pour that out, pour that into the beaker, and that way it's much easier to clean up. And then once you've dumped that out, you can rinse your flask and return it to the supplies cart.